Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of What's New in Prisma this week we're releasing version 3.13, and I think today's a special episode for Sabin and I because I think it's the first time that we are co-hosting. So Sabin, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well. Super excited to be back on What's New in Prisma. This is my second time on, and I've been looking forward to it.
That sounds good. So yeah, I wanted us to start off with a little casual chat, and Sabin, what's new in your world?
Oh, a ton. So ever since starting this new position as a developer advocate, I have gotten to do a lot of new things like giving talks and workshops and stuff. So I've just been diving into that world. And it's been an awesome experience so far. I've been having a lot of fun with it.
Interesting. And I believe you've been involved mostly in this week's MongoDB launch. So, how's been the
Mhm.
experience with giving a workshop for the first time compared to giving it in person, if you have? Yeah.
Yeah, so I have given a couple workshops in person. And so going into the online workshop, it was like a webinar sort of format. Um, I was feeling
Hmm.
pretty good. I was a little bit nervous because it was going to be my first time doing it online, but I was feeling pretty good about it. But then once we actually started getting going, I had a ton of fun. I I was expecting it to be fun, but I actually had like a lot of fun with it. So I'm looking forward to doing a lot more of those in the future.
That's really nice. And in the later part of the stream, I believe we'll cover the MongoDB launch, what's happened and what's to come. So, stay tuned for that. And in my world, nothing as interesting as the MongoDB launch, which you've been involved in, Sabin. However, for the last 3 weeks, I started this open source project to build sort of like a merger of GitHub discussions and discourse. It's been a little hard, and because trying to keep up with work and then maintaining the project, but it's something I'm excited to continuing it with because it's also a first time I'm almost building a production ready application. Yeah.
Mm. That sounds super cool, actually. I'm interested to see what that is.
It is not ready yet. It's barely alpha, but hopefully in the next coming weeks, should be ready. So yeah,
Nice.
so let's jump onto the agenda for this stream. So we'll start out with going through the 3.13.0 release. And after that, we have two guests or one guest from Amplication, the CEO. So stay tuned for that. And after that, we'll have Anthony, who's a friend of Prisma. We've seen him multiple times, and he'll give us a cool demo, which no spoilers yet. And finally, after that, we'll have a time for a few call to actions, and finally, a couple of Q&As. So if you have any questions when you're watching us, feel free to drop them in the chat, and then we'll tackle them at the end of the chat. So Sabin, take it away.
Sweet. Let me share my screen here. Make sure I've got the right one. And that should be
Let
shared.
me know when you're ready.
Yep.
Uh, we'll add it to the stream.
Well, and is the text big enough there? Does that look fine?
Yes, it's big enough for me. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
so we're looking at the 3.13.0 release today. And with this release, there was a lot of different improvements that helped with some different workflows that we've been seeing people have issues with or want sort of paths to be able to keep those workflows while working with Prisma. Um, and let's go through those here. So this first one, we have updated the migrate diff and db execute commands, so they're now generally available. And these were originally released on the 3.9.0 release, and they gave you the ability to do a lot of different workflows people were asking with for migrations. One of them specifically is being able to do like up and down migrations using the diff command. So what this command does is it allows you to provide a to schema, so a version of your schema that you want to go to, and a from, so maybe a current version of your schema, and it gives you a diff, basically a SQL file with the instructions on how to get from point A to point B. So that can be super useful and opens up the possibility for a lot of different potential workflows out there. And it's meant to be more of a tool that you can use to build your own workflows. It doesn't have a specific purpose where one size fits all. This is a tool that you can actually use and integrate in your workflows to build any sort of flow that you need. So that one's pretty cool. I've been excited to see that one shape up.
Yeah. Before we jump on to the next one, I was going through the active record documentation, and they have this as part of their toolchain. They have this rollback. It allows you to roll back to a specific migration. Say you have 5 migrations, it allows you to roll back to the third one and allows you to then roll out back to the fifth one. So it kind of makes it like a time machine or version control for migrations, which is pretty interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds super cool. That's awesome.
Yes.
Yep, and then this next one here, in version 3.5.0, we introduced extended indexes, so you can configure even further the indexes you set up in your tables. And with this new release, we've updated that a little bit to add another option that allows you to configure whether or not that index is clustered. And so we can see here that in order to do that, you would have maybe your ID column, and then you can pass it this clustered flag here, and it'll be either true or false to determine whether or not it's clustered. And the output would look something like this. So it's going to add the primary key constraint, and then it'll give it this option here for non-clustered. And so if you are using that, definitely take a look at these release notes. There is a potential breaking change in here. So just if you look at the documentation, you should be able to see whether or not you're running into that breaking change. That'll look like this, and it'll give you some instructions on what to look for, and if you are running into that issue, how to solve it. So that's pretty nice there.
Cool. And just a question, what does it, I am a little bit of a noob when it comes to indexing and databases. So what does it mean to have out cluster indexes?
To be honest, I'm not 100% sure on the actual, like maybe performance benefits of this. What I do know is that it just configures how these indexes are stored together to potentially give you maybe a little bit of a performance boost when your database is actually scanning through its file system for your information there.
My understanding was that when you cluster indexes, it stores records in your table in a particular order. So whenever you query your database, I think it queries in following that order, sort of. I'm not completely sure, but if someone in the chat and is watching has an explanation, or one of our guests, feel free to let us know what clustering indexes is. Yeah.
That would be awesome. I'll keep an eye out in the comments for that. I'm very interested. And then next here, we have updated native types for CockroachDB. So that's a database that is in preview right now, and it's very similar to like a Postgres database. So when we first set up this connector, we gave it the Postgres SQL native types because most of those mapped over pretty well. However, there are a couple of more specific types that CockroachDB supports. So with this update, we have introduced those, and we've switched to a set of types that is specific to CockroachDB. And if you're interested, and if you're using CockroachDB in your project, you can just run the Prisma DB pull command, and you should see those get pulled down into your schema. And then finally, we have now OpenSSL 3.0 support. And what this does is, if you're working on a different operating system that defaults to OpenSSL 3.0, in the past, you may have run into some issues when you're generating your Prisma client, just because of some operating system variations there that cause some issues. So what this will do is this should solve that problem for you. So if you are using maybe Ubuntu and you're using it with Prisma, give this a try. And if you run into any more issues, feel free to let us know. We're definitely wanting to fix up that workflow there. And hopefully not, though. Hopefully this should have it fixed up for you. So that's really cool. And then finally, we have all of these fixes and improvements. If you would like to go through these in greater detail, all these links are available and you can follow the issues there.
Awesome. And we got a response from Anthony, who's also our guest, from Google Copy Pasta. Apparently, I didn't know that's a thing. So a clustered index defines the order in which data is physically stored in a table. A table data can be sorted in only way, or the only way, and therefore can be clustered can be only clustered index per table. I'm not completely sure, but hopefully you can explain that once you're live. Yes,
Awesome, cool.
awesome. And with that, let's remember chat. Feel free to post any questions, and we'll move to the next segment. And our guest, we have a guest who's joined us, and his name is Yuval. He's also a friend of Prisma and built a tool called Amplication. So Yuval, hi, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Really good.
I am doing good too.
Great
So
honor to be here.
it's also an honor to have you on the stream. So could you take a moment to introduce yourself and Amplication for folks who may
Absolutely. If you want, I can also try to answer the cluster index first. So, actually,
what?
cluster index is the way that the data is actually ordered in the database. So I think the word one is missing in the text. Table data can sort it only in one way. So that's the actual clustered index, which determines the orders of the data in the table. Cool.
Gotcha.
So,
Okay.
uh, Hi
Verification.
guys, I'm Yuval, founder and CEO of Amplication from Tel Aviv, father of two. I've started working on Amplication, an open source dev tool for backend developer. 2 years ago, of course, using Prisma both for our product and also for the code we generate. We soon will can talk about what Amplication is doing, and I'll explain about the generated code. But we actually generate application for our users using Prisma also. So we love Prisma, and it's been great honor to be part of your journey and talk to you guys along the way. Nico is a great friend and an amazing guy, and I really love what you're doing.
Thank you. And we also really love what you're doing at Amplication because, again, the speed of development or the development tools enable people to just, I think in probably 20 minutes, you can have a full backend with Amplication, and it makes it pretty easy with all the bells and whistles attached to it. So, yeah. So, regarding
That's
that,
correct.
uh, yeah, I have a question, which is why did you select Prisma and why did you choose to use Prisma at the
So
yeah.
the nice thing in the story, I think, would be the point in time which we selected Prisma. So that was more than 2 years ago, actually, when V1 was actually Prisma V1 was actually Prisma Git repo, and the current Prisma version was in another repo called Prisma 2, and it was in early beta. And this is the time where we were looking for the right stack to build application with when we started building application, and we were looking around for ORM to be used in our product, and one that we can also use in the product we are generating. And we search for different options. The obvious one, type ORM, SQLize, they are all great. But at that time, we really appreciated what the vision of Prisma was at that time, including migration and all the TypeScript support and everything else in it. So we actually started using Prisma as kind of let's try it, and we never went back.
Interesting. And also to based on your experience trying out with other ORMs, I only have some experience with SQLize, and it's a little bit of a pain, but it works in its own way. So what were the challenges that you experienced using SQLize or type ORM?
So, when we started, one of the other choices we had was Nest.js as a framework.
Ah,
And Nest.js comes with a built-in integration with SQLize and or type ORM, and you can choose one of them. And it was all kind of easy path, so it wasn't that bad. So the tools are good, but we were looking the way it built, the way it allows us to extend what we're doing, the declarative files of the Prisma schema was one of the advantages. TypeScript support, of course, was really important at that time. And we actually also really were um, very happy with the community engagement that started around Prisma. And the community support from Prisma to the community, which was really cool. And we like that, and we like the vision. So that made this choice eventually.
Okay, interesting. Really interesting.
I think
And
also, when talking about features, I think migration is also really, really cool. It's very, very important, especially when you build something that need to auto generate and auto deploy stuff, and all the concept of the migration and being part of the CI/CD and being part of the version control, and that's amazing. We love that.
awesome. Yeah, I think one minor challenge, I don't want to say that I hate SQLize, but I think the challenge with SQLize was that it's JavaScript, and with JavaScript, there are no types most of the time, and it was kind of hard. I haven't tried out I think there's a TypeScript version of it. I should try it out at some point. So moving on to the next question. How does application use Prisma? Yeah.
So that's the cool part, and I mentioned that partially before. We're using Prisma in two hats. So one of them is actually building our product with Prisma, which makes our life and our engineers' life very easy, because just adding a field on the data schema, running Prisma generate, and like migration, and everything is really populated from there. And it works really great with we're using Nest with type GraphQL, so everything works really nicely, and that's one hat, and that's one way we use that. But also, of course, what application does eventually generates all the infrastructure, boilerplate, repetitive coding of a backend for the developer, in order for the developer to be able to start writing business logic from day one when they're working on a new project or a new service. So we actually use Prisma as kind of a guideline for our standards also. So we adopted, or even stole the naming convention and all the standards, and we are really trying to keep as close as we can to what you're doing, because you're really doing a great job, and we learning a lot from what you're doing. And I think you have a very tight and nice API. So the naming and all the object, the create inputs and the return and the results, and the filtering and search, everything is really logical, and the naming is really cool. So we stick to that, and that helps us to develop a lot of the features in application, instead of like going and start exploring. So we just looking at what you're doing. Of course, we're validating that it fits our need. We may change that a little bit sometimes, and that's one. And the other thing is that we actually created a package called Prisma DSL, where we can actually generate the schema from code, and the other way around, and we use that in application in order to generate the schema inside the apps we generated. So one way to use application, if you don't want to generate everything, but you just want to learn how to write Prisma schema, you can go to application, use the UI or CLI to define the data models, the relation, and with one click you will get the Prisma schema ready for you as part of the output of the entire tool.
I would really be interested in seeing that. And I wouldn't say it's stealing, because
Yeah,
technically there
absolutely.
are no ideas under the sun. So it's just borrowing ideas here.
Absolutely. That was.
Yes. So, and what's next on applications roadmap? Does application currently support MongoDB? Or
No, not yet. And actually, this is one of the most requested feature by the community. And of course, application is also open source, and we work a lot with community, thousands of users on our community, and a lot of contributors also. And this is one of the most common requests we see. And of course, because, like I said before, because we are using Prisma, now that you released the general availability of supporting Mongo, it should be really easy for us to also support Mongo using Prisma. So as long as we are using Prisma as the ORM, there should be no big issue replacing databases. So maybe we just need to generate the new Docker file for Mongo. Maybe we need to change the schema a little bit with the IDs and the collection and everything. But that should not be a big problem, and probably that should be part of the coming roadmap features. Beside that, we are working on some, I think, really exciting features for application, and I will mention like three of them, I think, which are most important features. One of them is bidirectional sync with GitHub. So right now we generate the code and we push that to GitHub. And of course, the developer that working with application wants to know that they can keep working with application, keep generating new change requests, new data schema, changes in table, and so on. And they want to make sure we are not overwriting any custom code on their GitHub. So once we do this bidirectional sync, we are aware of every customization you do, and you get this option to do continuous value with application. The other thing we are working on is microservice support. So right now we generate kind of a silo or monolith with GraphQL and REST API on one end, database on the other end, and a service in between. And we're working on a way to allow the developer to build like a microservice architecture where services can communicate to each other, either directly or via asynchronous queues, API gateways, different types of databases, and then be able to build something in much larger scale. And the last thing, I think it's the most exciting, the one I'm most exciting about, is the plugin system. We are working on a plugin system where we want to allow the community to be able to write plugins in order to be able to interact with the code generation process and then actually change the result of the code generation of application. So instead of the developer getting what we decided for them, they can get what they want to get. So they can get their own code because they will add different authentication type, different database types, or different naming convention, formatting, and everything like that.
It's really, really exciting. And do you intend to have at some point an enterprise edition or, yeah?
Yeah, so of course we want to be a sustainable business in order to be able to provide and continue to provide value to the community and the community edition. And on the other end, we need to be a sustainable business, and we do want to offer an enterprise edition of application. It includes some of the feature we already talked about or already mentioned, and additional some other enterprise like features that will be able to allow developers in organization and enterprises to be able to use application to generate application to call teams in organizations.
Okay, interesting. And one final question that popped up. So you mentioned that a user or a developer in this case is able to define the schema on the application UI on the web. So are developers also able to use some of the Prisma preview features like extended indexes, and does that affect application as a product?
So in application, you always have to, we added support in our console UI CLI for those features. And usually we try not to add features that are not GA in Prisma yet. And the other way is just take the generated code and customize it yourself. So of course, if you generated the code with us without the indexes and you want to add cluster indexes, you can easily add or alter the code we generated for you with anything Prisma support. You can also change the package JSON to upgrade the Prisma version if you want to. So that's the freedom when using application, because eventually our result of the process is code. You get the code and you can do whatever you want. You are the owner of the code. So all the preview features are not included yet. We have also a few versions behind Prisma as far as the GA also. For example, Mongo is not there, and some other stuff like Cascade Delete, for example, something that you added a few versions ago and somebody or already few asked it from the community is not there, but we're trying to keep up with the pace. And if something is more common and community is requesting for that, we usually have the option to add that, or even the community are sending a pull request with the support for that.
Okay, thank you. And those are my questions. Do you possibly have any questions, Sabin?
Yeah, I do. And less of a question, more of just a maybe a small request. I'm wondering if we sort of jumped into some of the cool features of Amplication and sort of the reasoning behind using Prisma. But for those people in the comments who aren't super familiar with Amplication as a whole, what does it do exactly? Is just a general overview, maybe.
Yeah, that's a great thing to do, of course. So yeah, application is a platform that generates back-end code for the developer for all the parts that they don't want to repeatedly, continuously writing by themselves, and they want to focus on the business value and the business logic. So application generates everything, all the boilerplates, API, REST API, GraphQL, all the models, DTOs, authentication, authorization, of course, Prisma schema, connection to the database, Docker files. You get all that shipped to your GitHub repo, and you can focus on writing the actual value of your application. So this is basically what we're trying to do in application. We saving developer time by automatically creating the code that they otherwise need to write themselves so they can focus on value. And of course, because we are a code generator, right now we are kind of very strictly opinionated. So our stack is quite opinionated. We generated with Node.js, Nest.js, Prisma, PostgreSDB. But like I mentioned, kind of the purpose of the plugin system we build is to allow the community and third party and anyone who want to take charge to be able to change part of the code we generate and make the stack less opinionated.
Awesome. And we have one question in the chat. And how does application compare to Redwood?
That's cool.
Oh, yeah.
So Redwood is framework that try to solve kind of end-to-end problems. So you get the client, the UI kind of get on top of React. And if I'm mistaken, just correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the best I know about Redwood. And they also use Prisma, and it kind of bring the developer kind of new language or new framework in order to build application faster, which is great. Comparing to that, application doesn't really invent any framework from scratch, or we didn't really come up with new technology to build applications. So we use well-known open source technology in our stack, like Prisma, like Postgres, and so on. I mentioned Node.js, Nest.js. And the idea is that we just want to save the developer some of the work while letting them all the ownership and responsibility to do the rest of the work. So we're not trying to bring or to provide some kind of end-to-end. We're just focusing on the boring stuff or the thing that developer don't want to do themselves.
Okay, interesting. Interesting. Thank you for joining us. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
It was a
Anthony
pleasure.
says, yeah, it was interesting to learn about application again because I'm sure a lot has changed since the last time we had you on the stream. Yeah.
Great. It was a pleasure being here. Thank you very much. It was great getting to know you, Sabine. And
Oh yeah,
Alex,
sure.
we always happy to see you liking and retweeting our post, and we always like what Prisma doing. So I'm sure we'll see both of you around, and say hi to Nico.
I will. And have a great rest of your day.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Ciao. So, moving on to the next segment, or before we do that, actually, I kind of like applications take on using opinionated tools because the Node.js ecosystem isn't opinionated. However, Nest.js uh, was the framework that came to solve that problem. So I think application is a really cool tool coming to solve the opinions because I like opinions because if there are no opinions, then my code base is going to be a mess, I guess. What's your take on it?
Yeah. Or your code base will have multiple different opinions and then it becomes like spaghetti. That's what
Yeah,
my code
definitely.
bases tend to do.
Okay, Cool. Interesting. Moving on to the next segment, we have a guest joining us. His name is Anthony, and Sabin, take it away. Let's invite him to the stream.
Cool. Awesome. Well,
Hello,
welcome,
everyone.
Anthony. How are you doing today?
Doing good. Yeah, it's great to meet you, Sabin. I don't think we've gotten to interact yet.
Yeah, I've seen you around, and I think I've seen you on Twitter a little bit and on some of these streams, but we haven't gotten to
You're on
talk
Twitter?
yet. So,
I'm never on Twitter. What do you mean?
oh,
I'm on Twitter all
I
day.
But yeah, no, it's really good to have you, and it's good to be able to finally talk. And can you give us maybe a little introduction of who you are and what you're working on?
Yeah, absolutely. I am a member of the Redwood JS core team. I was the one asking the questions about Redwood in the chat. And I was previously working at a GraphQL company called StepZen. But actually, in the last month or so, I have transitioned into the blockchain Web3 world and now work for a company called QuickNode. And we are infrastructure for blockchains. So if you want to spin up any sort of Web3 project that connects to something like Ethereum or Solana, then you can use us to get an endpoint up really quickly. So you can kind of think of it like a DigitalOcean or like a Vercel, but for like blockchain applications specifically. So that's really interesting. But I'm here to talk about Prisma because, as Alex said at the beginning, I am a longtime friend of Prisma through Redwood JS because I've been on the Redwood JS team now for over a year and have been using it for like 2 years now. So we've gotten to go on this whole journey with Prisma as you've gone from like Prisma to Prisma 2 to now back to Prisma and then all of that kind of stuff. And it's been awesome just because it's such a cool tool. And I'm going to be here to talk about MongoDB specifically, which is another thing that I've been kind of following as it's been going on. I remember reading that original like 100 comment long MongoDB GitHub issue about it, and I'm in there a couple times. So yeah, it's going to be really cool to kind of get back to like demoing some of this stuff that you all have been like working so hard on for like so long.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. Well, before we jump into the demo, thank you for the copy pasta on the extended indexes and all of that stuff. I learned something new today, so that was really cool.
Same.
I appreciate that. And yeah, let's if you're ready, we can go ahead and get your screen shared with your demo and get going on it.
Yeah, and then let me first drop a link here in the chat because this is going to be pretty much following along with a blog post that I have written, and it's walking through how to deploy a MongoDB database with Railway. So Railway is a really, really nice backend as a service that lets you spin up either Postgres, MySQL, Redis, or MongoDB, and you can also run servers and containers and things like that. And most of my Prisma projects use Railway to host the DB. So let me go ahead and, I got to give permission real quick for this so I can share my screen. I'm going to have to jump back out and back in. Hold on just one.
Sure. Sounds good. And this is where we start the small talk to
get
the chat going. So how's the weather?
Oh, the weather here is just as bad as usual. I live in Central California, and it's always either really, really hot or just a little bit hot. It's never cold. So
Okay, this is a new machine because I started my new company, so that's why I haven't shared a screen yet on StreamYard before. All right.
I think I ran into that issue last time I was on the stream as well. So
yeah, common problem. Okay, great. So this was the blog post that I dropped in the chat. And so query a MongoDB database with Prisma and Railway. Now, to get started on Railway, you can just go to dev.new, and you can actually do this without even creating an account if you want. So if anyone wants to follow along, and then it'll be there for like 7 days until you claim it after creating an actual account. But I've got an account, so you can do any of these plugins that I had mentioned. We're going to be doing MongoDB. And then over here, I'm going to build out a project totally from scratch here. That's going to just have a single little node script that is going to set up our Prisma client for us. So we just got to start with a couple dependencies here, Prisma client, and then the Prisma itself to run kind of the CLI commands. And you just got to do one little tweaking here because JavaScript, and include type module in your package.json. This is just a CMJ EMS kind of nonsense. Don't worry about that too much. And then here, we're going to initialize our Prisma project. This should all be fairly boilerplate stuff for people who have done lots of Prisma before. Our index.js file is going to be where our Prisma script is. And then our schema.prisma is, of course, our Prisma schema over here. Now, this is an old blog post that I need to update, because if you notice right here, it says Prisma feature MongoDB is deprecated because it's no longer a preview feature. So that's very exciting. Now, we have a basic post model with an ID, slug, title, and body. And then the ID is going to be auto-generated, kind of like a UUID, basically. And with that, that sets up our Prisma schema. Now we have our MongoDB project here in Railway. And Railway has just a really nice little dashboard here that will give you the ability to connect to your database like so. And I also included instructions for doing this with the CLI if you're interested, but we're just going to do it through the dashboard. And we're going to grab this connection string. And this is a simple little project I'll tear down afterwards. So I'm exposing my keys, which you should not do if you are out there in the world doing this yourself ever. But this is
to spend the next 2 minutes. I'm buying the chat time to look at the connection string and seal the information.
Yeah, there you go. Now, the one important thing that you need to do here is that MongoDB has certain query parameters that you can add that need to be added to access it. So if you're using MongoDB Atlas, this will not be exactly the same. And this is something I actually had to figure out to get this to work on Railway, is that there's slightly different params that have to go in there. So we are adding this auth source and setting it to admin, or else you won't have access to the DB. And then you also have to specify test, because Railway automatically generates a database called test for you, because MongoDB doesn't have tables, right? No SQL. So there's its own specific kind of way of connecting to like a database within your MongoDB database itself, which is a little confusing, but this should all get you going for the most part. Now, since we have a Prisma model, we can kind of create like a quote unquote schema, even though it's kind of schema-less to a certain extent with this Prisma DB push. And then now if we go back here, we see we have this post collection. So the DB push creates a collection for you. And this just simplifies your life a little bit and creates a little more consistency for you. Now, Mongosh is going to be our kind of like CLI tool, just so we can seed this with some data. And we're going to connect to it like so. And then once we're connected, we're going to run.
Again? Could you pronounce it again? Sorry.
Mongosh. MOGO. I mean, it's one of those things, you know, it's MongoDB shell, so I call it Mongosh. I have no idea if that's actually how you're supposed to say it or not, but that's how I say it. So
I think if that's not how you're supposed to say it, I prefer that way better.
Yeah. Yeah, Mongo shell is maybe how people say it, but I'm gonna stick with Mongosh. Okay, so this is so MongoDB has its own query language, right? Because it's not SQL, no SQL, and this is going to be insert one into our post collection. And once you run that, we got acknowledged true, and this ID that was created, that's kind of like the UUID I was talking about. If we go back to our data here, go into our post collection, go to here, we can now see we have this data in there. So that's all great. Now we got to actually do the Prisma part though with the Prisma client. So we're type quit to quit, and then we're going to generate the Prisma client. And that now will allow us to run this command. And this is the Prisma client command that's going to take the posts, and it's going to await post.find many, which is going to then return all of our posts in the database and then just console log it for us.
Before we take a step ahead, what's the PKG from Prisma client? Because I'm not sure I'm familiar with it.
I believe that is what allows you to do ESM imports instead of requiring the Prisma client. And that's also why we had this type module here, because we're not doing import, or it would be like const Prisma equals require Prisma client, or however that syntax looks. So I believe that is what this is for. I wrote this many months ago, so I don't entirely remember, but I think that's what it was.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, whoops. Okay. So we did that. And then last thing, if the demo gods are kind, we will run this script and get back the data. There you go. That's kind of like your whole end-to-end, just how do you get data into a Mongo database, read it back with Prisma. The next step would be then, how do you then write to the database? But this is kind of like a good get yourself up and running step. And yeah, that's the whole demo.
Awesome.
That's
really
awesome.
Cool to do a live demo. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really cool to see how quick. I mean, that was like just about 10 minutes to get get it up and running, get your database up, your application up, and get it connected. So that's really cool to see that. And actually, I've been seeing a lot about Railway. I've been meaning to play with it, but I haven't gotten to yet. So I was really excited to watch you step through that. How's your experience been with it?
Railway. Absolutely. I tell every single person I know about Railway all the time. I'm like, why aren't you using Railway? Because there's a lot of really good backend as a service these days. So if you want to just spin up like a Postgres database, there's like a half a dozen great options for you. So that would include like, Supabase, include Fly, include like nhost. There's lots of great ways to do this. But for something like MongoDB or like MySQL, PlanetScale now is great for MySQL. But before PlanetScale was around, there wasn't really a lot of good ways to get MySQL spun up, or even so. I liked Railway because not only does it give you a way to spin up Postgres, but it gives you a way to spin up a couple other databases as well. And then they're all unified into one dashboard workflow. That's like really nice and simple. And it's just like consistently worked for me. And like, I'll spin up a database, I'll have it in 10 seconds. I'll grab the connection string and I'll hit it and it just works. So I think it's great. You can also spin up like servers and containers, and people I know who've done that were kind of like mixed on. They're like, this didn't really quite work the way I was expecting it to, or so. That your mileage may vary for doing that, but for like using these like database add-ons, like it is so solid. And for me, it has just like worked incredibly well.
Nice. Yeah, that's super cool. I'm definitely, after seeing you walk through it, I'm going to have to go play with it after this and mess around a little bit.
Especially if you work for a company like Prisma, where you're going to be spinning up databases like every day. Like if you're a developer advocate for Prisma, you probably spin up like 100 databases a year or something like that,
Yeah. And Ferrybum also confirms that you talk about Railway all the time. So yeah,
yes. That's hilarious.
Yeah. And one question I do have, I have tried out Railway once or twice, but I'm not completely sure I understand it. Is it like a cloud hosting provider similar to Heroku or something? Or
yeah, exactly. So they are running it. They're running like GCP for you under the hood, essentially, and then giving you a nice interface into it. So it doesn't really expose the cloud to you. Like there's some services now, like Brandon Bayer just built flight control. And the point of flight control is like you're connecting to AWS resources and getting like a Heroku kind of UI, but you can just go into your AWS account and like see the resources. This is more like a Netlify, where you can't go into like the Amazon part of your Netlify functions, even though they're running on Amazon. They kind of hide it for you on purpose because they want to give you a nice experience so you can just get connected to it and not have to fuss with it. So that's more so what Railway is. It's running cloud stuff for you, but it's not entirely exposing it to you. So if you really do want like super duper fine grained control, it's not going to be the best thing for you. But if you want to have a database spun up and managed for you, then that's what it's great for.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I'll
and these
try it out.
all of these tools just get me so excited seeing all these different products that make it easy for a developer to get something up and running. I just think of Redwood with Railway spinning up a Mongo database, and then Prisma making it easy to interact with that database. It's just crazy the developer's experience nowadays to get something full stack, completely built out on a good infrastructure. It's really cool to see all of that come together into one a big cool product. So really like
it's great for people on production who are experienced devs. It's great for new devs who are trying to learn this stuff, and it's like just connecting to a Postgres database. Like I was someone who went through a boot camp like just a couple of years ago, and like databases are hard. Like they're really hard, and so giving you a nice interface into it can be like the difference between you shipping something versus not shipping something at all. And so it's like it's free. Like everything I showed you was 100% free. So it's like if you're going to try and scale an application and you're going to have like a lot of traffic, like that's going to be an issue. You're going to start paying for it, and there's going to be ways to optimize it better. But if you're like doing hobby projects, if you're learning, if you're like trying to ship a startup and you don't yet have scale, then it's great for all of those things. And then since you're just running a regular database, if you do need to migrate off at a certain point, you can do that. Or you can talk to the team and like cut some deals and get a cheaper rate, because that's also something that you can always do.
Yeah.
Interesting. And when you mentioned that databases are hard, my comment is that's why we're here for you as Prisma, because we
That's
care.
right.
You're all about making databases easy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, yeah, we really appreciate the demo. That was super cool to walk through, and that got me excited about playing with some of these tools. So yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, happy to be here. As I said before, always love Prisma. Always happy to come on and demo some stuff. So thank you for having me. It's a great time.
Cool. Have a great rest of your day. Ciao.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah. See ya.
Awesome. Those were some pretty cool discussions and demos. Again, I still fear live demos because you kind of have to make a sacrifice before the demo. Even though you've had a dry run like 5 or so times, something can still go wrong. So yeah, that was really bold. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I gave a workshop yesterday, and I did it I went through it like 4 times beforehand, and everything was good. And then once we got onto the workshop, I couldn't run my application at all. So it was definitely up to the random roulette of the workshop gods.
Yes. Definitely. And now we are on the last segment of What's New in Prisma, and we'll go over some few plugs or call to actions. So I'll share my screen. Be prepared for a loop. A moment. Switch. Yes. Can everyone see my screen? Yes. This is the Zoom sort of workflow. Yeah. When you share your screen, can everyone see my screen?
Looks good to me.
Cool. So this week we've had the MongoDB launch week, and if you haven't heard of it, we had like our formal release to get the community aware about the MongoDB connector going GA, and we've had lots of content going out. For example, Sabin's full stack remix tutorials, both articles and videos. We've had a lot of documentation and workshops going out. So stay tuned. You can still sign up because I think you can win $200 worth of Atlas credits, I believe, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So definitely it's not too late to sign up and get some free credits. The other thing that we do have is Prisma Day, which will be happening in person or more like hybrid on June 15th and 16th in Berlin. We'll have workshops on the 15th, and the conference will be on the 16th. And join us. It will be fun. It's in a summer garden. I have not been there yet, but I'm told it's fun. So if you'd like to attend, feel free to sign up. And if you'd also like to give a talk, feel free to submit a CFP, and we look forward to receiving it and reviewing it, I mean. Yeah. And finally, if you're interested in joining Prisma, we have a couple of openings, whether it's contributing to our open source product, which is Prisma Client, Migrate, and Studio, or you want to help us build the commercial product, or you'd like to if you're passionate about educating developers and joining us on this stream, feel free to join us. We have a couple of roles open on our website, so take a look. If you see one that you think you fit, apply, and hopefully we'll get to see you on this side of the stream. I hope. Yeah. And that's just about it. And if you have any questions regarding Prisma or Prisma as a company, feel free to reach out to any of us, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. And that's just about it. Yeah. I was just about to accidentally remove you from the stream. The stream is confusing. Yes. Awesome.
Cool.
So, and that's about it. We don't have any questions. Any few words? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just reading through the comments, seeing if there's any leftover questions. I didn't see any, so I think we're doing good.
Awesome. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one, and it should be in 2 weeks. Bye, everyone.
See ya.